Hello, this is Franco.cabral broadcasting from the Honest Liar podcast, a conversation around finding the inner liar within all of us and leveraging the truth to create expansion across all areas of your life. Today's topic is breathe fire. So I'm on this fire kick. If you heard my last podcast, I talked about fire quite a bit. This is going to be a different concept around fire, but something also that I thought was very relevant. So this is actually prior to the experience that I had on my last podcast where I talked about the exceptional, divine, epic weekend of renewal of vows and commitment that my wife and I had with each other. But the week prior, leading up to this epic weekend experience, was a complete fucking shit show for me. And one of the things I'm starting to realize, not the purpose of this podcast today, is that usually my deepest, darkest pits on the other side is something that is massively bright and beautiful. And I hadn't even really been thinking about it in preparation for my renewal of vows ceremony because there was so many moving parts and all the shit going on the week before. But clearly now I can see the dots that I can connect looking backwards. My bright light was the renewal of vows commitment and the weekend that I described in the last podcast. Having said that, I found myself on Monday prior to the weekend experience that I described in a complete fucking disastrous place in my mind. And the reason for that is that I was feeling a massive amount of pressure within my business. We had set some very lofty targets for this last quarter. We fell behind our target for the last 2-3 weeks. Pressures of all the things that I said I was going to do going into the end of the year. I did realize that a lot of these fires that I was feeling were fires that I created. In the past, I used to deal with fires that were brought on to me by my inaction. At least these were fires of things that I said I was going to do and targets that I was going to accomplish and anxiety and pressure that came with it. But I was in a really dark space on Monday. I went into my daily reflection process, which you guys have heard me talk about. It's a list of questions by basically I get the opportunity to check my ego and to check the stories that I have on a daily basis that trigger me and to see really what it is that I want from the triggers and to deeper understand myself. So on Monday night, I went through this process and I was triggered about my business. We had 2 soft weeks. I know some of it had to do with the holidays, but I was stressed out knowing that I was going into my renewal of vows weekend and I was feeling the pull into my business and I knew that I wasn't going to have as much time as I wanted to. I was feeling anxious. I was scared. We have the bigger we've grown, the more responsibilities, the more debt, the more our payroll is increased, the more pressure that comes. All of this I was feeling, and I was feeling it alone. Because I was choosing to. I wasn't really communicating this. I was scared. I didn't want to trigger my wife. I didn't really want to communicate it to my business partner. And all things that I know weren't really serving me in the moment. But I didn't have the clarity because I was feeling like I couldn't see. I was being blinded by all my triggers and all my anxieties, all my stories that I've created. And when I get to this place of overwhelmed, it's easy to let my stories take over and think that they're reality. So I checked myself and I checked my ego by going into my process of daily reflection and answering questions and realizing that, the story that I'd created wasn't really true and that I needed to take action. And it was just one of those times where it called for me to lead from the front within my business. And sometimes as a business owner, you have to be the CEO. Sometimes you got to go out in the field and be the soldier. Sometimes you got to be, the person who creates strategy. But in this moment, I got really clear on the fact that this was going to require a tactical effort for me to lead from the front, to go in the trenches, to show my team how it's done. And I wasn't going to feel better unless I got to that space, especially and I needed to do it quickly because I had my renewal of vows ceremony that was coming up. So I got some clarity as to what it is that I needed to do, but I still didn't feel this release. I felt like I was anxious. I knew what I needed to do, but I was scared. I was already thinking, well, what happens if I don't succeed? Then am I going to be present for my renewal of vows? The challenges that I was having, I didn't want to stress my wife out. And I had all these fucking stories that were still built up within me, and there was rage, there was anger, there was fear, there was pain, there was all of these feelings that I really wasn't letting go of. And when I started the process of personal development and working on myself and learning to understand myself, I was in a really dark place. So it was easier for me to tap into the rage that I was feeling, and because it was all around me and it was obvious. But I didn't really understand that over time, I felt so much light and gratitude throughout the course of this year because there's so much abundance in my life compared to where I was 2 years ago. And I almost started to get to this space where I was almost, I want to say, sedating with gratitude, sedating with light. Because there was so much light, I just wanted to keep focusing on the light, that I started to avoid and ignore some of the pain and the anxieties and the fears and the stresses and the pressure that I was feeling. Because it was almost like, who am I to bitch about what I'm, stressed out about when my life has gotten so much better over the last 2 years. And I had this reminder, kind of this, aha light bulb moment after I did my spark, that the light doesn't exist without the dark. And that when I start to think that there's no dark in my life, then I'm starting to lie to myself, or I'm starting to get comfortable because I'm not pushing hard enough. When I'm creating fire, there's heat that comes with fire. And the fire that I want to continue to grow brighter within my marriage or within my business or within my body, it only gets to grow brighter and grow stronger with my willingness and courage to collide continually with the dark that exists in my life. There's a yin and yang. We've all probably heard that, the dark and the light side. And the reality is that when I don't focus and give energy and attention to releasing the dark side, to investigating the dark side, eventually, if I ignore it, the dark side will slowly start to creep in my life, whether I want it or not on my terms. And I was reminded of an exercise that I learned and a process of releasing that anger and the rage that builds up inside of us. And I realized to myself, wow, I haven't done this exercise in a long time. Over time, if we start to, and what I was realizing for myself is that we start to pretend that I'm not really that upset or I'm not that triggered or things don't upset me because life is great, and we don't honor some space. I'm not saying that we dwell on it and, woe is me and be a victim to it, but we don't honor the space that, hey, fucked up shit happens. Life is complicated. Just because, I'm upset at somebody or something pissed me off or something triggered me or made me angry or sad doesn't mean that light and beauty and gratitude doesn't still exist. As a matter of fact, when I can honor that space and let myself feel what I'm feeling, that's actually the truest form of light, because that means I'm alive, and that gives me an abundance of light. So I had this reminder, and I did this process of breathing fire and letting the fire out. And there's a list of questions and a process by which I can teach you how to get to that space. If you want, you can reach out to me for some coaching. But essentially, with answering these questions, what I was really doing was diving deeper into the pain that I was feeling, the stress, the anxiety, the pressure. And the most important part for me of this process of breathing fire and releasing this energy was literally releasing this fucking primal energy that exists within all of us that sometimes we pretend it doesn't exist. Or maybe we're so out of tune or so out of practice with how to touch, that part of us that we're afraid to, or we have stories around touching on that primal nature, that dark side within us. So what I did was I went through this process. I put my kids to sleep. I realized, the final straw for me was that my son, who's being potty trained, who's done an amazing job, hadn't had an accident with me in a long time. He had an accident with me right as I was trying to put them to bed, and he pooped in his pants. And I literally was on fire. I went from 0 to 100 instantly, almost like he did something to piss me off, and he did it to me. Like he shit himself to piss me off, which is the most ridiculous thing ever. But that was the place where I realized, wow, I have no space within me right now. I am so triggered that I'm about to blow up on my child because he had an accident. So when I cleaned him up, I put him to bed, I kissed him goodnight, I kissed my daughter goodnight, I realized I gotta let this out. And I went into my garage and I went through this process of breathing fire and letting it out, and I released the anger, the frustration, the pain, and I screamed. I yelled at the top of my lungs with the intention of releasing the feelings and the fire that was inside me, because it was starting to burn in at my core, and it was actually stopping me from doing the very things that I know would give me the light that I was looking for. And I yelled and I screamed what I was feeling, and it was raw and it was primal, and there was nothing that made sense about it other than it made absolute sense. Because when I was done screaming my head off for like a minute, I felt this massive weight lifted off of me. And I knew that it was definitely intentional, and I gave it everything I got when I just yelled, because I didn't have a voice left. And the next day, I woke up lighter than I had any other day. I was ready to crush it. I was ready to lead from the front. And I went to work. And I went to work in my business as the soldier. Because sometimes within our business, the soldier is what's required to go shoot shit. And I went to town. The next day, I had a massive day. I led from the front. I closed 4 deals. And instantly felt relief. But I knew that it happened because I let that fire go within me, and I let it out. And it gave me the clarity and the space to choose what I really wanted the next day, and to stop being the victim, but also to recognize that it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have pain. It's okay to have rage. It's okay to cry. Because when I start pretending that those things don't exist in my life, the light that I've created starts to get clouded and darker by the dark that I'm not honoring that space. So that's the lesson that I wanted to leave with you guys today. And my ask of you is that if you haven't let out a good yell or a cry or whatever you're feeling, is take a moment. It takes 15 minutes. Go to a private, quiet place, whether it's your garage, whether it's your car, something that you're frustrated about, and just ask yourself, what in this moment is triggering me to be frustrated, angry, sad, whatever it is that you're feeling. And then, and the process is longer. I can teach you this again if you want to reach out to me, but at least ask yourself the question, if you could say whatever you wanted to this individual, to this thing. For me, it was my business. That was what was triggering me most in the moment. And then me, because of the stories I was creating with where I was at. But the question is, if you could scream at this individual with no filter, what would you say, and scream it aloud with all the intentions that you would scream it? And then just let it fucking rip. I guarantee you will feel, if you do this with intention and let it go, you will feel a massive amount of weight that's lifted off. You will feel clear, and you will be able to choose from that place what is the next action that you need to do to make sure that you're continuing this fire that you let out, and you're starting to create, versus being a victim to the story that you had created for yourself. So thank you for listening and tuning in to the Honest Liar podcast, a conversation around finding the inner liar within all of us and leveraging the truth to create expansion across all areas of your life. If you have found value in this podcast, please share with someone else you think will find value. Also, please rate and review the show as it helps with spreading light, which is my mission. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.